Uh, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, GISD Alliance members, distinguished guests. Uh, Thank you so much for attending the Sustainable Development Goals Investment Fair. This is a forum where governments and private investors come together to align commercially viable investment opportunities with the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we are pleased to welcome representative of multiple UN agencies, which will discuss in a roundtable how governments and investors can engage with the UN SDG investment ecosystem. We are also honored to be joined by Mr. James Noob, Economic Advisor to the President of Namibia, who will showcase a case study of a successful framework to leverage the power of sustainable finance through partnerships. My name is Maria Angela Paralancourt. I'm the Chief of the Strategic Engagement and Policy Integration Branch, and it is my honor to be today with you. To officially start today's agenda, I give the floor to Mr. Navid Hanif, Director of Financing for Sustainable Development of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to deliver opening remarks. Navid, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mariangela. Good morning and greetings to everyone. On behalf of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I have the honor to welcome you to the December edition of 2021 SDG Investment Fair. We created this platform in 2018 to bring together governments who have proposals for SDG impact projects and investors who are looking for such opportunities. And I want to highlight three things today for you to consider before you start your deliberations and engagement. First, the demand for this platform is growing every year. So far, 11 countries have participated in the fair, and 18 more have expressed their interest in participating in future fair sessions. And this year, we made the fair round the year platform, April, September, and now December, to accommodate the growing demand. We also managed over the last 2 years, to some extent, change the conversation. At the first fair, it was demand talking to demand. People who are looking, countries are looking for investments. They were demanding few things, and investors were demanding return, impact, and safety. We are changing this conversation into supply and demand conversation so that we can understand each other better. For that, we are doing two things today. One, Maria just mentioned, we are bringing the UN ecosystem together. UNDP, UNIDO, UNCDF, UNOPS, IFAD, they're all working on SDG investment, and we want to have system-wide conversation with the experts on these organizations. What have they learned? Why some countries get investment and others don't? And what can be done to address those challenges and unlock this flow of investment to these countries as well. As all of you know, the annual gap as of now is, well, it was $20.5 trillion before the pandemic. After the pandemic or during the pandemic, the assessments have gone to $4 trillion. For low income, middle income countries, it's around $400 billion per annum. I need to bridge it quickly. The second thing that will feature today in the fair, in addition to the ecosystem approach, is peer learning. Exercises with the case of Kenya that established the SDG partnership platform to scale up and make a more efficient use of resources devoted to promoting sustainable development. Namibia will also discuss how it is developing green hydrogen. And tomorrow we'll be honored to welcome the representative of Namibia and Ukraine, which will walk us through projects like the construction of the first two stages of the arterial waterway in the Kahofa region of Ukraine and Namibia's Southern Corridor Development Initiative, which has a strong focus on climate with projects that include the production of green ammonia and hydrogen. More than $7 billion of projects linked to the SDGs will be presented at this edition of the fair. Now, let me conclude by thanking and particularly thank the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance members for the support for the fair and other investors who have also joined occasionally. And I must acknowledge GIST members have been key allies in strengthening the bonds between public and the private sector. Moving forward, DESA envisions the SDG Fair as an indispensable catalyst and connector for SDG investment. This is to be achieved by providing a platform for countries and investors to interact, build capacity of countries to present bankable projects, and identifying available resources within the UN system to help countries to attract investment. So we'll be deploying expertise from the GIST colleagues, UN colleagues, and other investors. And we would have preferred to meet in person, but unfortunately, we cannot do it at this juncture, but we hope to have you all in New York in April next year, provided the conditions permit. Let me thank the moderators, panelists, and speakers for their contributions that we'll be making over the next 2 days. Let me thank my team also, led by Barry and Mariangela, for their outstanding performance in putting this fair together. This is going to be an interactive session. We encourage you to engage, make it a lively conversation, practical, useful, and result-oriented. We want the space to become a space for results. Thank you for your participation and engagement. We look forward to a very lively discussion today. Over to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Navid, for that introduction and opening remarks. Now it is my pleasure to take us to the roundtable. So this roundtable is really kind of a launching of the SDG Fair interaction with the UN SDG ecosystem on investment in the SDGs. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by representatives of a few of the main participants in this ecosystem. We will have today Ms. Stephanie Lenocci, Head of Private Sector Advisory and Implementation Unit in IFAD. We will have Benjamin Midbury, Investment Specialist at UNCDF. We will also have Massimiliano Riva, Investment Advisor at the Joint SDG Fund. And last but not least, Shepnet Senner, Senior Specialist at Sdg Impact at UNDP. We will be talking, initially I will invite the panelists for a very brief introduction of the work they do and their institution. And then we will have an interactive conversation based on examples, good practices, and how we can really understand where they can be reached by countries and how they are contributing to investment in the SDGs. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Stefania Lenocci, Head of Private Investor in Sector Advisory and Implementation Unit in IFAD. Thank you. Please, Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mariangela, and thank you very much for inviting us to the SDG Fair. IFAD is very happy to participate. This is not the first time that we do. So, and I'm also happy to kick off this panel today. So I just would like maybe to give you a sense of the work that we have been doing, including with the private sector. So as you know, IFAD is a United Nations agency and also an international financial institution, who's always worked with governments or developing countries to provide them with loans and grants to develop and implement rural development programs. And we have done this by targeting and investing in the last mile, meaning the remotest areas of developing countries, trying to help millions of rural people increase their productivity and income, access markets, find jobs, and build resilience to climate and other shocks. And our special focus is smallholder farmers. So in this context, we've been for 40 years now working indirectly with the private sector through the government investments and through value chain projects. But we have realized that as a modern IFI, we needed a more direct and strengthened engagement with the private sector. And this is why in 2019, we have changed our articles of agreement. And now we are in a position to invest not only indirectly in the private sector through our government investments, but we can invest also directly into the private sector. So these private sector companies are not big multinational, but are usually financial intermediaries, commercial banks, rural SMEs, farmer organizations who benefit IFAD's target groups, small producers in rural areas or developing countries. And these private sector operations are very much complementary to what we have been already doing through governments on the ground, and really leverage on our value proposition, which is our exclusive focus on rural development, our patient investment horizon, a portfolio approach that creates also operates as a de-risking tool, and our extensive field presence, and also our high risk appetites and also our smaller ticket size. So we also see our own investments as being additional to funding offered by the market and other international financial institutions. And because they tend to be of a small size, they tend to be also more affordable for our target group, while being still commercially viable to ensure the attraction of the private sector. And this is really true to the Agenda 2030 and the call really to blend public and private sector investments to increase the resources available to attract the SDGs. When doing this work, we've launched in February the private sector financing program that really tries to leverage these private sector investments to increase rural people productivity and market participation, job creation, increase women empowerment, and strengthen also environmental sustainability. And one important focus of this program is really on impact and results. So we are really the only IFI that systematically attributes impact to its portfolio. And we have been already doing it with the sovereign program, and we will apply the same rigor also to the private sector investment. So maybe just to give you a quick example, and then I'm happy to expand a little bit during the panel discussion. So our first investment has been a senior loan to a private sector company in Nigeria called Babangona, which provides a franchise model of services to small producers in the maize sector. And also rice sector, and this program is complementary to another investments that we've been doing with the government of Nigeria in the north of the country. So voilà, we are really thrilled to be here, and we also to learn from the other panelists what their agencies are doing, and see how we can collaborate together. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Stefania. I was saying that's really, really interesting, especially the example on the Nigerian services to small providers. This is really, really exciting for the fair. Please, now I give the floor to Ben Midbury, who is an investment specialist at UNCDF. Ben, you have the floor, please.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Midbury, and I'm an investment specialist here at the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Here at UNCDF, we focus on opening up access to capital in the least developed countries. I'm going to walk everyone through the three broad areas of our work today. The first area of work is promoting local transformative finance, opening up access to municipalities to open up capital access for projects that promote SDG growth. The second area that I'll explain is within inclusive digital economies, seeking to promote capital investment in areas that advance the digitization of economies within least developed countries. And then third and last, the investment platform that we have to invest directly into small and medium-sized enterprises within the least developed countries. So circling back to the first area of work, which we call local transformative finance, we have a team that deploys technical assistance and also grants to countries that are seeking to devolve access to funding to their local governments, specifically with a focus towards promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. So in very practical terms, an example of this is our program called Locale, which is seeking to promote investment in climate adaptation. So countries that are participating in the Locale program within UNCDF can obtain grants to help their local governments and municipalities identify areas for climate mitigation and provide assistance in arranging financing for projects that bring together public-private partnerships to help local communities adapt to climate change. I'll move on to the second area of work within the least developed countries here at the UN Capital Development Fund, which is called broadly inclusive digital economies. And so this involves providing grants to governments to help with their policy frameworks to promote the evolution of digital economies within their communities. And then also direct investments in private companies that are at the forefront of digitizing economies. So this combination of capacity building within governments, direct grants, and then also direct investments, both in the public and private sector, has had really impressive results in the past 10 years that has focused on helping to digitize finance, but that is evolving into every area of the economy. So it's a very exciting space to complement the first area that I described, which is often focused on infrastructure projects or large projects that involve a lot of boots on the ground and hard investments. The third area is very broad, but it encapsulates our direct investment capacity, both within small and medium-sized enterprises within emerging markets, and specifically the least developed countries. And then we also have a view towards providing an investment capacity within other UN entities within the UN development system. So just to provide a concrete example of that, one thing that our investment team is focused on right now is providing an investment function for the UN Global Fund for Coral Reefs. So in this program, the Global Fund for Coral Reefs has identified 26 priority ecosystems that hold coral reefs that are included in the 10% of coral that is likely to survive a 1.5 degree increase in global temperatures. The program puts together a basket of projects that help to identify the drivers of degradation for that particular coral reef ecosystem, and then provides grant funding, technical assistance, and then direct investments in companies that have a positive impact both on the coral reefs off the coasts of communities, but also within the communities themselves, so that the individuals who are most reliant upon the coral reefs, but then also have the greatest impact on coral reefs, have sustainable livelihoods that promote the health of the ecosystem. And within that very broad program that provides grants and technical assistance, UNCDF is providing lending to innovative early stage companies at the forefront of the blue economy sector having a reef positive impact. So with that, I'll conclude my opening remarks, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. As you can see, we already have different types of services. We have grants, we have technical assistance, we have direct investments, and in different sectors. I think this is going to be a really interesting kind of a show of the UN ecosystem as feeding to each other and collaborating. So now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Massimiliano Riva, who is an investor advisor in the joint SDG fund. Massimiliano, please, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mariangela and colleagues. Nice to see many familiar faces and colleagues on the line. And thanks for the invitation. This is a very important panel for us. We are a catalyst of the UN system. We are a funding mechanism established by the Secretary General to strengthen the UN reforms and particularly act on two levers, integrated policy and SDG financing, as a way to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs and their achievement. So it's a pleasure to be in a panel with many colleagues we work with every other day. The fund has a portfolio of over 200 million, and particularly in the area that I would like to discuss with you today is how we approach the SDG financing and how we can support the UN system. The unique feature of the fund is that we act through the leadership of UN resident coordinator in countries that assure a guarantee a consistent, coherent approach by the different agencies, as we see and learn today on their different expertise and technical work. We have three main type of funding. We have released over 100 million in the past 2 years on SDG financing. The first one is where we are active in 69 countries, mostly working on the enabling environment, the policy, the linking with planning, the dialogue platforms, the integrated national financing frameworks, and how they connect with the private sector. The part that I will focus more on and will provide more examples instead of what we call catalytic investments, meaning the blended finance, the blending of public and private money in order to leverage scarce financial resources and drive impact on the SDGs. There we do provide two types of support. One is what we call design grants, and this is about the formulation of those innovative ideas. And I think this is an important area for many colleagues here today. It's basically how we move from an idea, a concept, into something that can be operationalized and invested. So we worked particularly in the last 2 years with 28 UN country team and consortia at the country level that send a submission to us. So those are made by banks, financial sector, impact investors, development banks, IFIs, and all the parts of the ecosystem that is active in the specific country. And we made our first large investments up to 10 million in March, and we are hopefully making a new investment decision about in December and January for a new batch of countries. And let me give you, and then conclude. I'm happy to elaborate, give you a sense of what those are. So in Malawi, we are working on the establishment of the first sustainable agricultural impact fund in the country with UNDP, UNCDF, and the FAO. The fund is now operational, and we hope the first transaction will be happening even before Christmas. In Indonesia, we have worked with a larger coalition of UN entities to issue sovereign bonds to fund different types of infrastructure investments. The first tranche of 500 million euro was launched this September by the government. As well as in Indonesia, we have seeded an impact fund that will work on several aspects of the climate and gender agenda. The Mandiri Capital is the general partner, and we'll start already with a few investments in startup, hopefully as well this year. My colleague Ben mentioned coral reefs. One of our fourth investment was in Fiji, where we're collaborating again with a collection of UN agencies and including UNCDF. We are providing loans, concessional loans and grants to a new generation of blue enterprises, including a fertile company that produces organic fertilizers and direct investment into ecologies and different types of ecotourism activities related to marine protected areas. So wide range of type of investment vehicles and type of deals that we can support. And I will share also in the chat some analysis, including by our technical partners from Convergence, that have done on this portfolio of the United Nations. Happy to join the conversation with the colleagues, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. This is really interesting. It shows really we are talking about agriculture, we're talking about sovereigns, we're talking about impact investment, blended finance. I mean, I hope the audience can really see the realm of services, and we will talk later a little bit about how to find them, how to really reach them and their services. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Shebnem Diner, who is a senior specialist on SDG Impact at UNDP. Shebnem, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mariangela. Thank you so much for having me in this panel. And as my other colleagues, I'll try to give it a very short introduction of different services that we provide, basically. So it's SDG Impact is a flagship initiative within UNDP under Finance Sector Hub, and it was established and created by the administrator, UNDP administrator in 2018, then became part of the Finance Sector Hub. And SDG Impact is really, an initiative that address to catalyze private sector investment to emerging economies and create SDG aligned investments. And we have different service lines. The first one is, and we have three, I'll go over three of them. So the first one is SDG Impact Standards for private equity funds, bonds, and enterprises. I think in this fair, the most interesting part is the bonds. So the SDG Impact Standards, along with the upcoming SDG Impact Assurance Framework and the seal, they set the bar for management best practices, and the standards are to embed sustainability at the core of an organization. So SDG Impact Standards are the only management standards in the market that embed sustainability at the core of making decisions and making investment decisions. And they are really based on the understanding that the practice is the best precondition for performance. So they are not measurement frameworks or reporting frameworks or performance frameworks. They are really the decision-making or management tool. And we believe by creating a robust internal impact management systems, organizations that adopt the SDG Impact Standards will be in much better position to meet the growing and various sustainability reporting and disclosure requirements. And we are working on an assurance framework for the SDG Impact Standards. And at the end of this, the companies, organizations, or bond issuers who are adopting the standards will be able to get a seal, which we are working on, is called UNDP SDG Impact Seal. And this, we hope, will be helping to authenticate and reward successful adopters of the standards and minimize the SDG washing. The second service line is the education and trainings. So we have different education and trainings that give the users the knowledge and skills to implement the SDG Impact Standards and understand sustainability and embed impact. So we have training on SDG Impact Standards. We have training on sustainable finance and impact investing for public policymakers, which we just developed specifically for Uruguay and launched the course, the training. It's a five-day training, and we're going to pilot in Uruguay in February. And we have also trained the trainer course for SDG Impact Standards. So it's basically, we will provide the train the trainer program to train individuals or consultants to become trainers of the SDG Impact Standards in different markets. The third one, which again, I think the most interesting for the audience, and a lot of the audience I'm sure are familiar with the third one, it's called Sdg Investor Maps. So we have developed an Sdg Investor Map methodology in partnership with Dalberg, that has been implemented with specialized consultants around the world to create market intelligence on SDG-aligned investment opportunities. So the idea is, when identifying impact goals, obviously the funds and investors face different options and different choices, and the decision of defining in which sector, which area or SDG focus is a very important one, as both expected financial returns and impact and risks will vary depending on the choice they made. So Sdg Investor Maps basically support investors making these decisions by providing evidence-based information on investment opportunities that would generate both impact and profit given a particular local country context. So Sdg Investor Maps are developed, and then we have launched the Sdg Investor Platform, which is a web-based platform that presents the results of the maps, and this is in partnership with the GISD Alliance. We have completed 17 Sdg Investor Maps in different countries, and the findings are available in the Sdg Investor Platform. The platform can showcase also the country's government projects on its country pages, and we really are working and willing to work with governments to look at their projects and to make them more presentable and attractive for the investors and link them to the sectors identified as a result of the Sdg Investor Maps and present them on this platform that is a product of UNDP and GISD Alliance. This is the last piece. Once an investor map is completed, obviously the next step is to build a pipeline to attract investors. And for that, we are bringing in different tools internally from UNDP, but also working with external intermediaries who build a pipeline on these investment opportunity areas to attract investment. And one example is Ghana, is a very successful example. An intermediary actually built a $39 million SME investment project pipeline building on the Ghana Sdg Investor Map. And I'll stop here. Happy to answer any questions during the discussion.
Thank you so much, Eminem. So first of all, let me invite all the audience, all the participants to submit any questions that you may have to the chat. But to start, I would like to kind of ask a few questions from the panelists myself. So one question that immediately comes to my mind for IFAD, for example, or the Joint SDG Fund is, how are the countries in which you work, how are they selected, or how do they interact with you, and what does the process entail? So I don't know if you want to start, Stefania, telling us a little bit about that.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. No, thank you very much for the question. So basically, the private sector financing program invests mainly in low-income countries, lower middle-income countries, and fragile situations. So 90% of the investments of this 200 million program happens in these categories of countries. These countries needed to be member states of IFAD. And basically the way that so the investment goes not to the government, but to the private sector company. And to select the private sector company, there are a series of screening criteria that are used in terms of eligibility, in terms of relevance, alignment with our mandate, additionality, which is both financial and non-financial additionality, the development side, that means the extent to which the private sector company serves our focus groups, which are small producers in rural areas, and also of course the impact side, which we track. So all these criteria then determine how a company is selected. What happens is then, by doing so, because we look for companies or financial intermediaries that are that benefit the same target groups of our sovereign portfolio, or whose interventions are complementary with what we're doing through government investments, we have a very close dialogue with the government of a given country. And actually, the government provides their non-objection to our investments. They don't approve the project, but we interface with them to make sure that they provide us the green light to go ahead with this investment. So this is in a nutshell how it works.
Thank you so much. And do the country offices, the country teams, and the resident coordinators play any role in this?
Our country office is in the lead for the interaction with the government, but we have not yet had an interaction with a resident coordinator in the country. But it is something that we could explore. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Just also because the SDG fund has the joint SDG funds has also agriculture. I would like to turn to you to say the same, like how you spoke about Malawi and the Impact Fund. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How the process works? Why Malawi?
Sure. Actually, we received 155 proposals from over 110 UN country teams. So we have selected at the end of 40 March, and we hope to select 5 or 6 before the end of the year. So it was quite a process, if you wish, but it was also a process that allowed from what is submitted to us initially, concepts detailed and with identification of partners, usually including government, development banks, and private sector anchor investors. Those all our grants are implemented by our colleagues here. So we provide the resources directly only to the UN system. So the way that our calls, which are open to usually to a number of either regions or themes, are published and shared with all agencies and resident coordinators. And then the collection of the proposals happens at the country level under the leadership of the resident coordinators. And then those proposals are sent to us for an independent review. So the independent review in this case is particularly in blended finance. It's quite, as you may know, is a quite complex undertaking because it has to deal with managing several risks as well as connecting what are the sponsors' wishes with the investment strategy of investors. So what has happened is from these 155 proposals, we turned down to 28 through an independent system of evaluation, which is external to the Secretariat. And to those 28, we offer them design grants to develop and further move from concept to something that can be operationalized and financed. The criteria are about impact and chances of success. There are specific criteria that also include aspects related to leverage. Those are public, and I'm happy to share in the chat all the details. Then out of, since we have limited financial weight, as we could not fund all the programs that we wish to, of course, we had to select them based on a competitive scoring. So that's how the proposals are selected. For colleagues that want to engage, my suggestion is to connect with your UN agencies if you already have contacts in the country, or with the UN Resident Coordination Officer and office, so that can help you to get through the different calls. I am afraid that at this stage, with this last investment, we will be concluding our first phase, and we are negotiating a new replenishment. So I cannot communicate new dates for new funding today, but that is the system that we work, and should we be successful to get replenished towards mid of the year, we'll be able to announce new call for proposals or new type of engagement with the countries. So the direct funding goes to the United Nations, and those funding itself can be then translated into the other financial products. For example, UNCDF is using those resources in Malawi to operationalize an impact fund that is, in this case, hosted in Luxembourg, and will offer loans, mostly loans to SMEs in agriculture and finance industries in Malawi. So this is for for the different type of organization, government, and different type of investors that are interested to us. The best way to interact is to interact with the national team and be part of those consortium that apply to us. For companies, it's a bit of a different interaction because each instrument, as I told at the beginning, is quite different. So, for example, each instrument has a very specific tactic in terms of the selection of the enterprises. For example, in the specific case of Malawi, the first bunch of companies actually come from 4 accelerators that were already operational in the country, and that for a period for over 5 years have already pre-selected the companies. So UNCDF there, and I mean, I'm not sure Ben is involved in the program, so I will not put on the spot, but they would be then pre-selecting the companies that will go into the investment selection phase and due diligence. So money goes to UN entities through competitive calls with external experts reviewing them, and then we offer both design grants, and to the ones that are successful, also full size grants up to 10 million. And then for the companies, etc., would very much depend on the country and the type of instrument. So more information can be shared. And if you want later on, I can be more specific on some of those.
Thank you. We really want specificities and networking and kind of share all the information that we can, because as you can see, there is a lot of work going on all across the system. As one of the participants writes in the chat, we really need to start building a roadmap and a kind of a place where we can find each other and we can really work across. And for example, how can a project on agriculture that may have been presented in the SDG Fair, how can they be helped through the facilities that you have? So this is a working process, and I think in progress, and I think it's really good. I would like to now jump a little bit to the LDC focus. We were talking about risks, and the perception of risk in LDC countries is really high, and there are many projects that are really ready, but may not be considered because of the perceptions. So I would like to ask Massimiliano. No, sorry, Benjamin. Benjamin, the UN Capital Development Fund, you have a focus on LDCs, and so how do you work with countries to really mobilize investment and demystify a little bit that the risks are too high for investment? Ben, please.
Thanks for that question. So first of all, I think technical assistance and capacity building is a key element of that, and that's really seeking to increase the institutional capacity of governments to be able to attract funding and to prepare for capital and access to that with the support of professionals who have gone down that path before. Secondly, providing capital directly to projects and companies in least developed countries by providing concessional loans is a key part of our strategy. And that is intended to create a demonstration effect in a portfolio of examples that demonstrate the impact and also the creditworthiness of projects in some of the most perceived challenging markets out there. So those are broadly it. And I would just encourage on the concept of, how do you get this started? I would encourage particularly countries that are currently classified as LDCs to come as you are, because our UNCDF is here to help you at every step of the way and provide the kind of support necessary to build the technical capacity that is necessary to position yourself for additional capital flows from foreign investors. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ben. I think now I would like to talk to Shebnem. So you mentioned that you're working with the GISD, so the Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance. So the GISD is also an important part of this SDG fair. So it would be great if you can tell us how has been the interaction and how are the prospects for joint work with them, and in the particular area of private investment for small projects that may be not big enough for international corporation to fund.
Yeah, thank you, Mariangela. Actually, these are very good questions. So, frankly, the design of the Sdg Investor Platform was done with great insights and inputs of the GISD Alliance members. And it was really important because we have these maps and we have the results, but to understand, what kind of information is the most important for the investors, like the members of the GISD Alliance, and what to show and what to emphasize on the platform for them to actually use this information for their investment decisions. It was really important, their insights. So we hired a human-centered design firm to design the Sdg Investor Platform, and we had several interviews with a lot of investors, but especially with the GISD Alliance members. So what was really pleasantly surprising to us was that they all said that, it's great to see some numbers on the platform in terms of the market size of such an investment opportunity area, or in terms of, a potential return profile of an investment opportunity area. Having said that, what is more interesting to them is to see the impact information on the platform, because what they're wondering, and they all said the same thing, they have obviously analysts working 24 hours a day, pretty much, and they can run the numbers, but what they don't know, if they invest to such an area that is, presented in the Sdg Investor Maps, what would be the potential development outcome and what would be the potential impact of their investment. Because obviously the investors who is coming and searching for these kind of opportunities, they are like-minded investors, right? They would like to align their investments with the SDGs, and they would like to create a positive impact for people and planet. So the coordination and collaboration with the GISD Alliance was excellent from the very beginning, and we have launched the platform together. And actually, we have worked with one of the big investors, Bancolombia. Our UNDP country office, Colombia country office, work with them so closely on many different aspects on investment, but they are working on an investment that is identified as a result of the Sdg Investor Map in Colombia. So this is great news. Having said that, to your point about small investments and big investors, you are very right. I mean, the big investors would not come directly to invest in a very small investment that is identified either Sdg Investor Maps or in any other. But for that, we really would like to work with the governments to have their projects to be presented in the Sdg Investor Platform, which also we heard from GISD Alliance members that it would be very helpful to have that. But for that, it's really, we need to really bridge, and I think, we hopefully will do it with you and Dessa, with you, all of you, to bridge that, how do I say it, maybe the language gap, to transfer or to translate the government projects in a way that is presentable and attractive for investors, like big investors, like the GISD Alliance members or others. So for them to actually look at it and think about investing to those projects. But again, for that, from our perspective as UNDP, we have to first make sure that the government projects that we are going to present in our platform are SDG aligned, and creating positive impact on the ground. And we have a methodology to do that. So hopefully we will bridge that gap. In terms of small investments, as I mentioned, we are working with intermediaries to build this pipeline. And interestingly, we see some trends in different regions. And we are also working on aggregating similar investments in one bucket. So for example, digital platforms, right? So it could be small in one country, but if you were to invest in digital platforms in a region from different countries, then it becomes a little bit of bigger investment opportunity for big investors.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I think we are all working to the same vein. As you know, the SDG Investment Fair is precisely a place in which countries can come to us, come to the team, to Barry, to the colleagues, to really discuss the projects that they have, and we try to support in making them bankable, in putting them in a presentation that can attract investors. And we have investors in the audience, and tomorrow we're going to have Ukraine, and we're going to have Malawi with really interesting projects to discuss and to open. So we are all working together on this. I think one question that I would like to ask in general to the panel is, speaking about small projects, we also have perhaps in many cases just a small amount of resources. But we all know how important are resources in a catalytic way. So I don't know if you have any examples that you have seen in your own experience on how smaller amounts of finance can catalyzed larger amounts. I don't know if one of you would like to take the floor on this. Stefania, I see you.
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm happy to be the first one to take this question. So, as you say, catalyzing private sector investments is a very important aspect of the work that we need to do to see how public resources can really leverage private sector money to the most. And actually, through our program, the IFAD Private Sector Financing Program, actually what we aim to do is to leverage through our 200 million program up to 1 billion resources available. So a 1 to 5 leveraging ratio. And just maybe to give you an example, I mentioned one example before, which was the project in Nigeria, where we have provided a senior loan to this private sector company that works with small farmers and provides them a franchise model, a package of inputs and seeds and credit and harvesting support and marketing services. So basically, what we've provided a 5 million loan for a project that costs over $90 million. So the rest, we have provided 5, the rest of the 90 is provided by other investors. So we look at this leveraging effect very closely, and we try to select the investments where our money has really this role to catalyze most of the resources. But more in general, especially in the space where we invest, which is agriculture, the problem is often that agriculture, among all the sectors, is one of the riskiest one, and smallholder agriculture even more. And private sector investors are reluctant to invest in this space exactly because of the risks, the transactions costs that are very high. So what we're trying to do is that we really try to provide that financial support that maybe private sector investors may not be willing to provide. So we act as first mover, and we provide, especially by providing finance with maturity and concessionality, which is not available on the market, which allow these private sector companies or financial intermediaries really to grow their business and also have a demonstration effect that these investments can generate profits. And it's really through this demonstration effect that we are confident that we will be able to attract other private sector investors and so make these businesses sustainable in the long run and able to survive also without our continuous support.
Great, Stefania, thank you. I don't know, Ben, did you also want to talk about the catalytic effects, or Massimiliano or Shebnem?
I guess I can just affirm the strategy of, to the extent that you have limited capital, the strategy of trying to provide demonstration effects by focusing on a high potential project, perhaps using that capital in a way that helps to de-risk private investment by making it a first loss or providing guarantees. Those are all, I think, the go-to strategies for trying to stretch resources as far as you can.
Just a reflection to share, perhaps, is that $1 is not always $1 in all the countries, right? Because, for example, our program in Indonesia with 10 million aims to leverage 4.5 billions. That is not what the investment in agriculture in Malawi will do. But does not mean that the impact is less valuable in some other sectors. So as I see many countries and colleagues, I would say it's very important to consider the direct one-to-one leverage. This is one of our key performance indicators. So we look at it very closely, but also we look at the specific sectors, the market creation potential. And I think, as colleagues said, you also need to be a bit patient, because actually the lower amounts may be able to provide actually bigger leverage, but only in a longer time frame. So also not be too much, focus on always on short term in terms of the mobilization of resources.
Thank you so much. I have now a question from the audience about the Sdg Investor Platform. So Shebnem, can you tell us if the investment projects listed in the Sdg Investor Platform can be listed in other platforms, or is it more of an exclusive space?
So just to, before I answer this question, I want to just make sure that it's clear that in the Sdg Investor Platform, we really do not have any projects for an investor to go and invest directly. So it's more, you can maybe thinking the information coming from the Sdg Investor Platform more like a first step before an investor does start a due diligence process. So it's really identifying the sectors, the subsectors, or the areas or investment opportunities, obviously including some companies' information that are aligned with the SDGs in a specific country and that have a potential impact relevant to whatever the investment opportunity area is in that specific country. So it's really deep country level market intelligence that will help and guide the investors to look into that specific area further. However, as we all know, investors want everything on a silver plate ready to go to invest. So that's why actually, using the Sdg Investor Map information, we are working with different tools, including within UNDP, we have a process called GSIV, which is like identifying specific companies or projects and going through a due diligence process by a panel and actually saying, okay, this company is the one that you could invest. That's one. Second, we work with intermediaries, as I mentioned, like independent consultants or consultant companies, financial intermediaries, to develop a concrete project pipeline. So our information on the Sdg Investor Platform is public because UNDP, this is a public good and we do this as a public good. So that's why anyone can use this information, leverage this information to build a project pipeline as a result of this. But when it comes to government projects, if we finally achieve to have the government projects presented on the platform. The platform has the functionalities of confidentiality, so we could, we could make people to register. We could provide this information to some certain investors if we want to. So that's something, again, I think we will discuss with all of you, with UNDESA and with the governments themselves.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna have two very interesting case studies today. We're gonna really hear about Namibia's. Namibia has a very interesting network already on UN system, and tomorrow we're also going to hear about Kenya. Kenya has also created a very interesting interactive platform for investment, and this already show something that was mentioned, how is the UN working together and how we can really potentiate what we each of us are doing, and also using this investment fair, which is really your fair, is member states fair, and also the UN system ecosystem on investment. So I have a question for Ben from the audience. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on efforts that are targeting digitization solutions? So, for example, in what countries this program is not happening or is happening, and what kind of private companies can apply for this?
Sure, thanks for the question. So our areas of focus in terms of country really span the entire least developed countries, and particularly in projects where we're working with other UN agencies that can extend to countries that don't fall under that designation. With respect to just going a little bit deeper in the types of digitization projects, it can fall along an extremely broad spectrum. Just if you focus on digitizing financial services, that can be as simple as creating the policy framework for bringing digital financial services to the country in an organized manner, or helping a country really go to the next level of extending additional types of financial services to the mass market. And that could also be policy work, or that could be providing direct investments into private companies that are really trying to demonstrate new frontiers, whether that's innovative insurance products or additional types of money transfers. But increasingly, the work has really broadened to all areas of the economy as digitization is really kind of eating the world, so to say. That could be, again, anything from direct investment to policy advice on helping to provide digital transportation markets. So it really is tailored to where the country is, what the opportunities are. There's an opportunity for pretty high touch engagement to really help countries and local communities advance to the next level. Was there a third question to that topic?
Let me see. We have another question for you if you want to also mention.
So before we get there, I think it was there was a question of what kind of private companies can apply for funding. So once our team works with the leaders in a country to really identify the opportunities for improvement, the resources flowing to private companies will always take the form of some kind of public call for proposals, so that there's a transparent and open process, since all the resources that come from UNCDF are either grants or concessional funding. So everyone needs to have an equal opportunity to access those resources. So I would say if you're a private company or you have private companies in an investment portfolio, I would encourage them to go to the UNCDF website, and you'll be able to just sign up for announcements when there are call for proposals in the markets that are relevant to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to ask a question more about technical assistance and project preparation. Because, I mean, resources are very important, but in many cases, the problem for some projects is precisely that even if the idea is good and the potential for profits is there, it's difficult to bring the project itself to a level of technicality that is accessible for investors. So
Yeah.
some of you mentioned already you have technical assistance. I know that UNDP works with countries also on this. So I don't know if you want to touch upon a little bit that side, because even on DESA, we are also trying, because there are many facilities that offer this at the UN system and also outside. And one of the work that we want to do next year is a little bit putting together the offer on these kind of issues to really make bankable and even non-bankable projects more accessible for investors in terms of being more prepared and have the information that's needed. Ben, you wanted to talk about that, or Massimiliano?
Oh, sure. I'll make some brief comments and then pass the mic over. The technical assistance that we are typically providing, again, falls under very broad spectrum, and it can be anywhere from helping to scope out what type of projects are appropriate, or what sources of funding and financial structuring is most appropriate, to grants to develop specific business plans and proposals. It really spans the gambit from project origination through to completion. And just like any other resource, whether it's coming from a public or private provider, it comes down to networking and hustling to find just the right sources of funding and resources for the specific project or area of focus that our audience is focused on. So there's no big gate or central application process for any type of resource that you're funding, whether you're chasing venture capital funding or bank lending or public resources from the UN development system. So I guess that's just an encouragement. So if you have a project or an ambition that you're feeling like you're banging your head against the wall trying to find the right resources, just have the confidence that it's like that for everyone, and it just takes a lot of grit to find the right dots to connect.
Well, yeah, and also to that, don't give up, right? that was the other. I mean, I can add, we are a funder, right? So we fund both technical assistance before the project is funded and or invested upon, and after. And we do that through UN agencies you see here. So what we have put together is basically teams made by experts of UN agencies helping to develop these specific proposals. And we developed a kind of, a way to support them, but it's really, there is no, no single, path that you can drive. So, but on our side, we're happy, and hopefully if our donors allow us to continue to fund this type of work, both on the design and on the, once it is funded and implemented.
Thank you, Massimiliano. Shabnam, I would like to talk to you also about the part of, I mean, you're presenting in the investment platform, you present kind of the macroeconomic of the country, the risks, the opportunities. So this is also an area in which the SDG Fair will try to expand next year, maybe, in opportunities, for example, on sovereign funds, on sovereign bonds, on green bonds, on different instruments that are available and should be attractive to bring investment to countries in a different way, not project by project, but also this way. So, Sam, can you tell us a little bit about that part of the vision of the platform on that side?
Yeah, sure. So under FSH, we have a team also who is advising and helping the interested governments to issue sovereign bonds that are SDG aligned. And happy to connect anyone with the team. And complementary to that, as I mentioned, we have the Sdg Impact standards for bond issuers. So the standards are ready, and actually, they can be accessed through the platform already. But what we will bring to the platform is more the digitized version of the standards, because currently it's a PDF document that is really could be hard to manage and to self-assess, for example, for the bond issuers who would like to self-assess themselves against the standards. But we are working actually with Microsoft to digitize the standards and bring them on the Sdg Investor Platform. So how is it going to help? It's going to help the governments, the sovereigns, to actually self-assess themselves through the Sdg Impact standards for bond issuers, and and then go through an assurance process if they want, and again get the UNDP Sdg Impact seal on the bonds that certifies that the bonds are SDG aligned. All is coming. It's just the assurance framework and the seal is under work right now. We are working on it, and we are hoping to have everything in place by next year, probably Q2.
Fantastic. Any last words that you would like to add, Stefania, from your side?
Thank you very much. I mean, I think it has been great to learn all the efforts that are being deployed in the field, and I think that, as also mentioned by some of the people that have put comments in the chat, it's really, there are a lot of initiatives going on, and these are very great opportunities also to try to connect the dots, and the SDG Fair is a great opportunity to do that, and we really look forward to continuing to see how we can leverage on our expertise and finance and to contribute further to the SDGs. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really want to thank all the members of the panel. It really is it's a clear example of how we are working in a mutually supportive way. We have different instruments, and we can also work together to help figure out which one are the best instruments for each project. So before passing to the next one, to the very important case study that we have now on green hydrogen, and that really showcases what the UN is doing, I would like to obviously invite you and to come tomorrow, because it's going to be really, really exciting. Tomorrow we have Ukraine, really, really exciting opportunities. And we have Namibia again, presenting the projects in particular, and we have Kenya, which will present most likely in April, but wants to also showcase how the UN is working together already in pushing this, which is really what we work at the UN is for the betterment of lives and livelihoods. So I thank you so much to the panel, and now it is my real honor and pleasure to invite James Mnupi, the economic advisor to the president in Namibia, to talk to us about Namibia's multilateral approach to green hydrogen development. James, you have the floor.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mariana, and thanks to the UN family for having Namibia on this day, and where we can share a little bit of what we've been doing in order to develop our green hydrogen opportunities here in Namibia. Before I get into the presentation, which I know my colleagues at the UN will be setting up and will be projecting for all of you to see, I think I just wanted to first of all thank the UN family. So whenever you're collaborating on these projects, the collaboration doesn't always have to be big and very sophisticated. I think a very good practical example of that are the two banners sitting behind me here. Somebody from the UN family, Eunice, drove to my house with his banners earlier today, just to showcase again the collaboration between the Namibian government and Eunice and the UN. So thank you so much for the banners. I think So far, I'm the only one who actually has the SDG banners, so thank you for that. But before again I get into the presentation, I'd also really love to actually thank the UNDP and the broader UN family for helping Namibia put together an SDG Investor Map that essentially has investment opportunity areas cataloged in this particular book. It's just about 100 pages long. And they've identified about 13 different investment opportunity areas that equate to just over 17.4 billion US dollars of investment opportunities across Namibia. And I would be very, very glad to present some of those investment opportunities tomorrow at the investment fair. So if we now start getting into the presentation, what you know, the presentation that I'm actually showing you today is something that we actually presented at the United Nations General Assembly in September, right? And so again, just to really pay homage to the UN family, this is a presentation that we took to stakeholders in New York, and you will see that multilateralism is definitely the name of the game. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see that, you know, the opening sort of comments from us was that, you know, we remain absolutely committed to our Paris agreements. And Namibia actually submitted its national determined contributions updated this year right on time. And those NDCs were calling for a 91% reduction of our emissions. And so whenever you are sometimes looking to attract investors to invest in your country, it's very useful, of course, to speak the language of investors and to speak the language of the global community, because there's utility, of course, in diversifying the source of capital. I think the next then slide was really just showing a bit of an overview in terms of the narrative that we took the investors through. You can see there that green hydrogen, of course, is a big part of this conversation, but we wanted to show the investors the bigger picture. With regards to parallels, we were trying to show how Namibia is aligned with other key players and/or institutions around the world in its ambitions to decarbonize not just Namibia, but of course the region of Southern Africa and even Europe and beyond. And so that's what the parallel section was about. Then we showed them how we've developed this particular vision. And then, of course, I'll give you an overview of the key investment opportunities in this Southern Corridor Development Initiative. That's what SCDI stands for. And that, of course, is part of our president's socioeconomic recovery plan. So why don't we get into it? So once we started trying to paint the bigger picture, it was very useful if you listen to all of the speakers today. Crowding in funding into a small economy such as ours is extremely important to reduce your cost of capital and, of course, to diversify your investor base. My background was in investment management before, of course, the president asked me to be the economic advisor. And so, you know, blending in that private sector, public sector expertise into government is one of the things I think our president has done really well. And that, of course, helped us to shape this narrative. So shifting the trillions is essentially a theme for us where we were going to try and use innovative local projects, package them, of course, within the SDG framework, and then mobilize climate capital into Namibia. And you'll see the results of that. Decarbonizing Namibia is important. Namibia, however, you know, represents about 0.003 of global emissions. So the ambition to just decarbonize Namibia through our NDCs, you know, was never really going to be big enough to really attract large global investors. And so when we looked at our position, we could be in a massively beneficial position to decarbonize the Southern African power pool by exporting renewable energy into that particular area, potentially decarbonizing South Africa, which is you know, I think about the 8th largest carbon emitter in the world and contributes more than half of the continent's emissions. So providing them with green hydrogen molecules or even green ammonia molecules to decarbonize some of their economy is a story and an ambition that global investors would love to be a part of. And then, of course, we will be looking to export those molecules into Europe as well. And then, of course, the third goal is it's a really big testament to our president. You know, our president spent a significant amount of time at the United Nations, and he always mentioned that Namibia was a child of universal solidarity And he always says that we were midwifed by the United Nations. And so giving back to that United Nations community and to the globe was always a key goal. And so being a case study to help others learn from our particular endeavors was always a goal. And that's exactly what we're doing on this platform and on many other platforms. So who else actually wants to do this? The next slide that really talks about parallels begins to then talk about that. Of course, because we were at the UN, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, was just about to launch Build Back Better World, which was an initiative where the United States was looking to partner with G7 countries to mobilize concessionary capital and funding to low income. And you heard today about how we need to help the LDCs as well attract some capital, but even middle income countries, as long as the infrastructure and the assets that we're building could contribute, of course, to fighting climate change. And so, we thought this was an amazing opportunity for Namibia, that is a middle income country, to narrate its narrative and its objectives in line with the Build Back Better World. You can see the Southern Corridor Development Initiative there. That's our own vision that I'll talk about. And then, of course, we were going to COP26, where, again, the world was really coming together to make some really bold commitments to fight climate change. And so once you started painting that narrative, investors already were now, curious, but they now saw how you were aligning with their objectives and not just from a return perspective, but of course from an ESG perspective for deployers of capital. That's very important. So the next slide now begins to introduce a bit of the story. And when you look at the timeline, the next slide actually shows you that the place where we started dreaming this particular ambitious opportunity or vision was actually, again, at the United Nations General Assembly in September 2020, where my president made this particular statement saying that, look, we want to change the economic structure of Namibia. And in order to do that, we do want to make use of innovative financial tools such as green bonds, transition bonds, even climate swaps, in order to make it easier and more liquid for large-scale investments to be connected to investment opportunity areas in Namibia. But note this, the president also said that championing African research and development is a key objective for us as well, because we think that is how countries, developing countries, can capture larger portions of the value chain and of the opportunities when it comes to, for example, producing goods in their own country. So instead of just allowing people to come and produce green hydrogen and export it, we actually want to start getting involved in informing our students of the science required to develop proton exchange membranes in terms of electrolyzer manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've now started putting this particular vision into action. And so the next slide now shows you how, after he made the statement in September 2020, on the 18th of March, the president went ahead and launched the Harambee Prosperity Plan right here in Namibia at State House. It was a public document that is now being tracked by a dedicated performance delivery unit to ensure that we're project managing, the 192 odd projects within HPP2 in as detailed a manner as possible. So, and within HPP2, he has 5 pillars in there. The first one is governance. The next one is the economic advancement pillar. There's a social progression pillar, infrastructure development, and of course, international relations. Green hydrogen is articulated in the economic advancement pillar, and its third goal there. After we started essentially sharing this vision, various countries started coming to us and saying, look, we're actually fairly aligned with you. And so on the 25th of August, a very practical example of that really came to rise. And that's when we signed a joint communication of intent with the Ministry of Education and Research in Germany, which essentially gave Namibia a 14 million euro grant to help start developing green hydrogen related research and or pilot projects in Namibia to prove the concept. Of course, because Germany would be a strategic off-taker of the green hydrogen that we make in Namibia. And so this, again, we just thought was a really good practical example of how once you begin to align yourself with a specific global agenda and play to your strength, the capital does come to you. This $40 million, as you'll see later on, would obviously form part of our integrated national financing framework that, of course, we've been working with the United Nations as well to develop. And then, of course, all of that then culminated in the next slide, where Namibia essentially received 9 different offers from 6 different global developers to build gigawatt scale assets in the Namibian desert, in the Karas region, in an area called the Sdg National Park. And I mean, you know, I'll talk a little bit about the size of these offers, but needless to say, these offers, in terms of the potential FDI that it could attract into Namibia, could easily double the Namibian GDP. But the key thing I think I wanted to highlight in that paragraph was, again, we were looking to attract this investment while at the same time recognizing that it was important to be good stewards of the natural resources and public assets that we have. And because of that, the capital that we began to attract was quite large. So if you go to the next slide, you then start to look at what the SCDI overview was about. And again, green hydrogen is a big part of this. But actually, there are 4 other key areas in the Southern Corridor Development Initiative that we'd be looking to develop in order to really try and cover all of the 17 SDGs. And before I talk about those 5 areas, I just want to say that, you know, when we went to COP26, our president was one of 6 or 7 heads of state that stood up in Glasgow and signed on to the Glasgow breakthroughs. And the Glasgow breakthroughs essentially noted that these countries were committed to accelerating the deployment of innovation and technology to reduce a carbon emission footprint as quickly as possible. And there were 5 key areas that were targeted. Power was one, transport was another one, hydrogen was another one, agriculture, and of course, steel. And in each of these 5 areas, which obviously I'll be presenting to tomorrow to the investors in detail, all of those areas were covered, because in the mining, we'd love to be producing green steel in Namibia, green zinc as well, actually, and iron ore that could be reduced by green hydrogen. Of course, energy equates to power. With the logistics, we obviously equate that to transport. We'd love to be producing green hydrogen trains here in Namibia. And then, of course, with the agriculture, you know, we'd love to be using locally produced green ammonia in order to using the hydrogen and combining it with nitrogen to then provide local made fertilizer for our agricultural farms there. And so, of course, the words are useful, but pictorially, it's always useful to explain to people what this looks like. And so the next slide then really does attempt to take you on a small journey to Namibia. The southernmost part of Namibia here is called the Karas region. And essentially, we then started depicting to the Namibian people what were the key towns in that Karas region that could attract significant development. So Lüderitz, for example, is where the big wind and solar resource lays. And so that particular town, together with those light blue areas there, I mean, that area is about 5,700 square kilometers. The whole Sdg National Park is about 24,000 square kilometers. So it has significant potential to produce amazing low-cost hydrogen, but of course, low-cost renewable energy as well. And so in Lüderitz, we would absolutely love to produce green hydrogen there, put together ammonia synthesis plants. We would love to develop and deepen that port, which obviously can export the green hydrogen to Europe. But in our ambitions to do that, of course, we again chose a very multilateral route, and we started collaborating with the Port of Rotterdam, which is the biggest port in Europe, 45 kilometers, about 42.6 billion euros in GDP, and we have an MOU with them. And then, of course, we're also collaborating with the Belgian government, who have signed an MOU as well to help us develop green hydrogen assets in Namibia. Oranje, we want to really establish a a world-class R&D center there, again, linking to the president's ambition of championing R&D within Namibia to ensure that we capture as much of that value chain as possible. Roshpina is where we would like to produce the green zinc. We'll be getting that ore from South Africa, refining it here. We already do that, but of course we're using coal-fired power to do that. We would love to be doing that with renewable electricity. We'd love to bring that across the border with this rail network here, using our green hydrogen trains. And of course, in Kitmanshoop and Tangiskopi, that is where these agricultural farms are, where we would love to be using our locally made fertilizer. And then, of course, again, Namibia is looking to export both green electrons through the Southern African power pool and green hydrogen molecules through pipelines, for example, into South Africa, and of course, green ammonia onto the ship and off into Europe and other markets. So this gives you a very nice holistic view of what the opportunities are. And yes, as Barry mentioned in the chat, we will be looking to present the details of these particular projects tomorrow. But if you listen to the rest of the colleagues today, a big part of how to get this done is to make sure that you're thinking creatively, dynamically, and holistically about how to fund this project. And given our background, the next slide begins to show you how we've been working with the United Nations family and our own expertise within the Namibian government and the private sector as well to start putting together a funding strategy. So the first thing as a government is we wanted to develop what we call a central security depository that allows you essentially to electronically settle bonds within your ecosystem. And that, of course, then allows foreigners, people from outside Namibia, to start buying your financial instruments in order to fund opportunities in Namibia. So that's the first goal. The second goal was to approach funding from a new lens. And that lens is the integrated national financing framework that, of course, again, as we mentioned before, the UN family was helping us develop, and it's a part of our development finance assessment report. Essentially, the INFF encourages governments to do the following. Do not just rely on typical government bonds or government-led funding to fund all of your projects and all of your infrastructure development universally. Try and start using a more blended financing approach, combine grant funding with climate financing, with traditional financing to fund projects that have specific characteristics that appeal to investors. So for example, if you want to fund a green hydrogen project, you could very well raise a green bond. And that green bond could give you a cheaper source of capital given the fact that this particular asset will reduce climate emissions quite materially, right? And so you see that the next bullet point there is the Namibian government now beginning to commit to develop a sustainability bond or a green bond, just as the president had envisioned in September last year, where we were going to start using innovative financial tools to lower the weighted average cost of capital of government to get this going. And of course, because we're a child of international solidarity, as he mentions it, we'd love to list that bond on multiple exchanges, both here at home, because Namibia actually is a fairly, relative to African countries, a fairly sophisticated capital market. We have institutional savings here of more than 100% of GDP. It's normally the assets that we don't have that are large enough. So we think this bond could be large enough to absorb some of our own capital, but of course attract capital from other markets as well. And so we do have ambitions to list this particular bond in the Luxembourg Stock Exchange and even in the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next in tomorrow's presentation. But so if you then go really to the penultimate slide, there you're beginning to now see the bigger picture, right? And the bigger picture, as Eunice reminded me this morning, is SDGs, SDGs, SDGs. If you wrap your investment ambitions and show a direct connection of how those assets deliver, right, towards the solving or the contribution to SDGs around the world and how they can reduce emissions, but also how they can, reduce poverty, give clean energy. There is a huge appetite from investors for assets like that. You do sometimes have to, pay a little bit extra to make sure you're auditing the manner in which the funds raised are being used to raise these projects. but typically it's absolutely worth it, and it does put a country out as a world-class investment destination, and that's exactly what Namibia is looking to do. And so really with the last slide, we were really just thanking everyone, for listening, but the key thing here was that, to develop high standard and transparent infrastructure, partnerships are absolutely key. And whether you're partnering with the financial community, with the United Nations family, with other countries as well, which is why Namibia is a member of the African Green Hydrogen Alliance, the key thing is you have to do this in partnership and make sure that you're speaking to the needs of the communities in the long run, because of course, once you're not looking after the needs of the communities, you have really sort of lost the plot. And I'd like to read a small sentence that we're working on with colleagues from IRENA that notes the following. The 2030 Sustainable Development Goals provide a reflection of the multi-dimensional nature of human security. And depending, for example, on how you develop your projects, including green hydrogen, it could have a massive positive or even a negative impact on those SDGs. And for us as Namibia, we are absolutely committed to develop these projects and have as positive an impact as possible. Thank you so much, Maria Agnella, for having me. I can see I've kept my time, and I'd love to hand over the mic back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, James. I must say, it's really, really inspiring. I really think you really have shown us both the immense amount of work that you have put on this, and that your country has put on this, and the president's interest, but also a very deep understanding of how this process works and what needs to be included at every step to make something like this successful. So it's really an honor that you chose to present this here. And we would like to ask you just a few questions. We haven't received so far, I think, questions from the audience, but from our side, we have a few questions. So, for example, at the UN, we are really always interested in South-South cooperation. So, are there any other countries that have approached Namibia to really work on this project from the South?
Absolutely. I think such a crucial element. And Namibia, again, we were proactive about looking for members in the southern part of the globe to collaborate with. I think a very easy example is Chile. Right from the beginning, as we were looking to develop our green hydrogen ambitions, I mean, Chile is absolutely one of the world-class countries that is looking to develop a green hydrogen industry. And so we were, modest enough to go to Chile and look to learn from them. And obviously then input some of the lessons there into our own strategy. So that's the first one. But a really obvious example, and in the country's name even starts with South, is a country right next to us, right? Not only is it a massive emitter, but it's a massive potential market. And so with South Africa, our president specifically reached out to Cyril Ramaphosa, and they spoke about the need for regional integration when we're developing some of these assets. Again, on top of that, Sasol, which is Africa's largest company by revenue last time I checked, actually was one of those 6 bidders that put in an RFP to develop these projects in Namibia. Now, they weren't necessarily successful the first time around, but we have continued to nurture that conversation with them, because Sasol is one of the largest carbon emitters on the continent. In fact, per barrel of oil equivalent, they're one of the largest emitters in the world. But they also have a dedicated strategy to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And so one of the assets that we would need to build from Namibia is a potential pipeline that could be 2,300 kilometers long, from Lüderitz all the way to Boegoebaai in the Northern Cape and to Secunda. That particular asset, as you can imagine, would cost about 6.4 billion euros. And Namibia can't and shouldn't look to develop such an asset alone. You want to partner with South Africa on that, but of course with the global community and the key private sector players involved in that region. So those are 2 easy examples I can give on South-South collaboration. And then of course the last one was the fact that Namibia joined the African Green Hydrogen Alliance. We actually just had our first meeting after COP26 today, and there were members from Mauritania to Morocco to Kenya to South Africa and Namibia, it was very exciting to be a part of that conversation. And we're hoping to share what we want to do as an association later on in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. One other question that comes through us is how did the decision process go? Like, how did Namibia decide to go from an SDG focus and at the end concluded in this kind of in this sector, in this particular development that is planned? How the decision making is really important for us and the partners along the way that really kind of were the first step to tell you this is possible, because sometimes you can have really big dreams, but now how did you go from dreams to putting this in this way?
Fantastic. I mean, great question. So, to be honest, a big part of it, if I was to think of one key theme, it's probably going to be humility, and that's not the most financial of terms, but that's what really it was. So, you know, the government realized that Namibia was in a very tough fiscal situation. We had just come off, you know, a slackening commodity cycle. We went then through 2 years of drought in Namibia, and Namibia relies on agriculture quite a bit. And then, of course, we got hit by COVID. And so what happened there was, you know, the president and the government said, look, we needed to start infusing extra know-how into the government to help us think about how to structure an economic recovery plan. So he hired 4 or 5 key sort of private sector players, you know, into the central bank, into the Ministry of Finance. He set up a new Namibian Investment Promotion and Development Board to serve as our IPA, Investment Promotion Agency. And you know, he asked me to leave the asset management sector to go and specifically advise him on the economy at State House. So that level of humility to say we do need private sector expertise in government was the first start. On top of that, we actually started partnering with the Harvard Kennedy School as well. And Professor Ricardo Hausman and his team came in and started helping us assess in a very deep technical way our economic model. And so once you began to bring all of those expertise around the table, we started looking at the Namibian opportunity, at least economy, in a new way. Post that, it was all about now structuring a long-term vision. We looked at what Namibia's God-given talents were. I mean, if you look at our flag, we actually have the sun right there on the flag. So we realized that we have world-class solar in abundance, and we started structuring an investment plan around that renewable energy play. And of course, because we had access to world-class research from Bloomberg Terminals and the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we could see where the money was going and where the interest was in decarbonizing the planet. And then it was a matter of aligning our God-given talents with the ambitions of the world, and then finding a very easy way to make those ambitions realized in Namibia. And lastly, you know, Marignella, I will say to you, dreaming is one thing, doing is another. And so putting together a project delivery unit, you know, at State House, and bringing on professional project managers to help us plan the project, but also execute it and monitor it with Gantt charts, etc., was a huge part of taking a Namibian government that was very good at visioning, but now one that was becoming better at executing as well. And then partnering with other countries and other multilateral organizations, of course, is a key element as well. So those are the ones, you know, given the limited time that I can tell you, I can probably go in quite a bit of depth in each of those, but that gives you a flavor of what we try to do.
Thank you so much. I have a very interesting question from the audience, and is about ESG. How can you please tell us how ESG is kind of visualizing this project, because it is really important to, before launching any endeavor, to really have the community, the environment, and governance in mind. So how is Namibia working on this part of the visualization of the project?
Fantastic. So before again, so my sort of previous working experience was as an asset manager, right? And we deployed pension fund money and high net worth individual money into listed equities and listed bonds, right? And in Namibia, we have large pension funds like GIPF, the Government Institutional Pension Fund, that would invest into such instruments. Now, both the GIPF and my firm and many other institutions in Namibia were all signatories to the United Nations UNPRI, right? The Principles for Responsible Investing. And because we had already factored that into our modus operandi as a non-banking financial services sector in Namibia, when I went to government and I was now trying to help the government develop investment opportunities that would appeal to investors, I knew what the investors were looking for, right? They were looking for opportunities that would actually give them an opportunity to take ESG right across the line. And if you did that well, they would give you capital at a lower cost of capital, right? So, for example, let's look at even just this green hydrogen bond. We know that it'd be fantastic for the environment, but we're also developing it in a national park. And so one of the key, when we developed the criteria to evaluate the request for proposals, one of the key criteria accounted for, I think, 25%, or is it 15%, sorry, of the whole scoring criteria was how were you going to build these assets in a national park and respect the natural and flora and fauna in that national park? Because we knew that we wanted to develop assets that would help the environment, but that would leave a minimal footprint in an ecologically sensitive area, right? So that was a key criteria right up front. If you look at social, this particular asset could help us meet our rural electrification needs, which is a part of our HPP2 agenda, right? Namibia imports about in fact, last year, 70% of our electricity needs. 40% of that comes from South Africa. That's all coal-fired power. But over 50% of our rural areas don't have access to electricity. And building this asset would help us reduce your cost of electricity and at the same time help you raise enough money to build rural electrification networks through mini grids, etc. So that's a big part of the agenda as well when we put out the RFP. And then lastly, governance. I mean, Namibia, look, we're lucky. Our president, again, was one of the founding authors of the Constitution. And within that Constitution, they actually put provisions to protect the environment. So from a governance architecture perspective already, our Constitution essentially ensures that everyone who's looking to deploy capital in Namibia is trying to protect the environment. That's the first. And then after that, we ran an RFP process that followed the provisions of the Nature Conservation Act. And after that, we are then going to be following all our other procurement rules in order to pick the appropriate winner, just to ensure that from a governance perspective, we were following all of the right protocols and legislation ecosystem that we have in our country. So we formed a bid evaluation committee to help with this particular evaluation. Then that reported to the Green Hydrogen Council, which was a group of ministers that the president put together to nimbly develop a synthetic fuels industry in Namibia. That then went and reported to cabinet, and only cabinet, not the president, only cabinet could actually then approve the proposals, and only after that did we announce them at COP26. And so that governance architecture helps investors appreciate that Namibia is being run in a way that is sustainable. And these assets that we're looking to build that are multi-decade in nature, 40 years is the length of the concession, will survive various regimes. And that's another way of de-risking your investments.
Thank you, James. This kind of idea of whole of government makes me think a lot about the INFFs, the Integrated National Financing Frameworks. So I'm sure this is something that is really active in your country. One other question that comes from the audience is, I mean, green hydrogen is really good, but it still has potential issues in terms of how production, distribution, and storage costs, and also in a way that something we have to always be aware is the greenwashing strategy that you may have from some oil refiners maybe that may look for this combustion, but still can be polluting. So I'm sure from the other side you're also looking at this.
Absolutely, and you know, that's why we are trying very hard to share information within our country but around the world on the difference between, for example, green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. You know, blue hydrogen would look to make hydrogen using fossil fuels, but then trying to capture the carbon, and that is a lot of where the sort of oil companies are trying to focus on as a next step to transition. And you know, we're not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. We're saying, okay, that's one option. But from our side, you know, our natural strength lies in using our renewable energy assets to develop this particular green hydrogen opportunity. Now, as you've mentioned, green hydrogen is also at the moment fairly expensive relative to, say, for example, brown or gray hydrogen. And so that's where a lot of the questions come in. Is it's expensive to make. There are also quite a bit of energy losses in taking this electricity, converting it into hydrogen, possibly then converting that into ammonia and or liquid organic hydrogen carriers. And we absolutely accept all of that. What we did realize though as Namibia is that the globe is absolutely committed to trying to reduce the cost of green hydrogen. And we saw that as a massive opportunity to attract investment into a country, but to also attract cutting edge technology and thinking into our country, right? Because this is such a nascent industry there, and we have such amazing conditions to test out different types of technologies because our wind resource is so powerful, or our sun has such high capacity factors. This isn't just about production of green hydrogen, but it's about accelerating the R&D side of it as well. And then of course, you know, Marianela, one of the key things is green hydrogen is an end product that requires a significantly large deployment of renewable energy. And so, you know, everyone's focusing on green hydrogen, but at the end of the day, you have to develop solar farms and wind turbine farms at scale. And that is something we were not doing given our very large renewable energy resource. I mean, I think in the south, we have like a wind farm with like 3 turbines producing, I think, about 6 to 7 megawatts, right? So, but we have this potential to produce gigawatt scale assets. So that was the other strategy of the government, was to say, start by advocating for the deployment of large-scale solar and wind resources. You can export those electrons into, you know, Southern African power pool after you've looked after your own, but allow and encourage cutting-edge thinking to come into your country. We've actually formed a Namibian Green Hydrogen Research Institute to be championed by the 2 national universities, and start exchanging IP. And attract, you know, instead of suffering from brain drain, attract people from around the world to come and ply their trade in Namibia with cutting edge resources and cutting edge technology. So absolutely there are challenges with green hydrogen, but we would love to be a part of the solution versus saying this is too complicated for us. We'll come back in 2027 when it's all solved. So that's our approach. And you know, it's early days and we need to be humble, but we're fairly committed to that approach. And you know, we have quite a few global partners who are committed to helping us with this as well, and we are grateful for that.
No, absolutely, absolutely, James. I think this is a really, really great case study, an example about how multilateral cooperation, not only from countries, from the UN system, from private sector, and from leadership within a country in a very difficult moment, is bearing fruits, and we really are very excited to have this opportunity tomorrow to hear more, to really have kind of the investors presentation with more financing details, with more of what's needed to take this to the next step, and how private investors can really push this forward. So it is really important here to work together. We have one last question maybe before wrapping up, and it's what somebody asked us if the INFF was developed in this country, and how has been it including in this whole of government perspective that you presented to us.
Fantastic. Yes, it has. And in fact, I've been a party to the launching of the DFA, which has the INFF in it, but also trying to help our National Planning Commission and our Minister of Finance champion this INFF approach across our government. In fact, it was so important for us that we included it in HPP2. It's a part of the presidential socioeconomic recovery, because then, like I said, it does help us diversify the capital and reduce our cost of funding as well. A very good practical example of how we're going about this now, because it's one thing to articulate the vision and say we're going to do this, but how do you actually get this going? Tomorrow morning at 8:30 our time, we're actually having a meeting with the executive director of the Ministry of Finance and experts hired by the EU Commission that are going to help the Namibian government begin to actually structure a potential green bond or a sustainability bond, and we'll even consider a social bond. What the Minister of Finance then has to do is they're bringing all of the different assets that we were going to be funding in a traditional manner, and we're going to try and see if we then can't craft portfolios that fit the bill of those different financial instruments, and then try to start building the covenants and potentially see if there's a market for that. And I'll talk about that tomorrow in my presentation, but that just gives you a taste of a practical example of how we're taking what the INFF is asking us to do, and we're implementing it in government. One last example, we're also pursuing the PPP Act, the Public-Private Partnership Act. So we're trying to deploy PPPs in Namibia as a way to get private sector know-how and capital involved in developing public sector infrastructure to provide those public services. And I'm a member of that PPP committee, and so that's another practical way of how the government was trying to get private sector expertise into the government. So those are the two things, but of course we'll give you guys the link of where our INFF and our DFA is articulated, and you can read it there for yourself as well. Thank you so much, Marianela, for having me.
Thank you so much, Sam. For those who don't know, the INFFs are the Integrated National Financing Frameworks. They were a creation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and they have been developed conceptually in DESA and are being implemented together with UNDP. And they really serve as a place in which countries can prioritize their financing needs and map them together with the financing availability that you have in this in the countries and the priorities. And in a moment like COVID, the COVID crisis, this has really helped countries push and advance the very limited resources after the economy basically collapsed for a moment, with important short-term and long-term needs. So it has been really a pleasure for me. Thanks, James, and thanks again to the panel that participated before. I think this has been a very informative session. We will have more sessions like this in the next fairs that are now yearly. We have 3 over the year planned. So I would like to invite you again, all to come tomorrow at 9 in the morning. We will have very interesting presentations from Namibia and from Ukraine. And again, we are gonna also hear about Kenya as an opener for what we can expect in April. So thank you all so much for your participation. And please reach out if you have any questions. We can put you in touch with the entities that participated today and other entities of the UN ecosystem. UN Ops, for example, was going to participate today, but they were not able to be here. So please count with the SDG Investment Fair as yours, and we will do everything we can to support investments in the SDGs. Thank you all so much. And thanks to the team to really putting this together. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.